At the very, very beginning of the 80s, I was just a normal lad that used to go out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe once through the week.
It was hard. Life was hard. There wasn't a lot of money about, so they just wanted to get on, go to work, come home, have the pay, go on a holiday once a year maybe.
I didn't have a lot of social life because I worked at weekends.
Married at 18, had 2 kids by the time I was 20. I was also working shift work on buses.
After working at the pit for about 10 hours a day, yes, I usually went and had a game of darts occasionally.
Big drinkers and like to gamble on the horses and the likes of that. Pigeon men, allotment men, and they used to have the whippet racing and things like that.
I was a breakdancer, believe it or not. That's what I love to do. I can see you laughing, but I seriously was a breakdancer. My name was Cobra. And we used to go around town with a roll of lino and a ghetto blaster.
CB radio was one of the main things in the 80s. And you used to probably think, what? And we used to radio each other, but you had to speak in a CB radio language. Breakers, anyone in there?
Everybody looked forward to the weekends, get out and have a good old drink and a bit dancing.
The vast majority of the drinking establishments, nationally, barring 3 pubs, were social clubs.
All the pubs were absolutely packed, and it was just a great place to be on a Saturday night, was Alnwick. Everything was bouncing, music, entertainment.
Drink in town in the big market, go clubbing because it was student night on a Thursday.
Alnwick Working Men's Club, where they used to have local bands and singers, but we used to look forward to the bingo and then dress up in really wide trousers and sparkly tops and perms.
I used to wear orange paisley shirts.
I did like 80s fashion because I liked big shoulders. I've got very narrow shoulders, so the shoulder pads suited me.
But they used to come in with the leather trousers, and they used to have like the bib and brace, you know, just on a night out in Alnwick and a bib and brace or leather trousers. No.
Puffy dresses come in and heels and shoulder pads and big perms.
In the early 80s, because of Princess Diana, everyone had their hair cut short.
Lads began to wear really smart trousers and shirts and started to even wear makeup and things.
One day I would dye my hair and I thought, well, I had a bit of purple in and a bit of pink in and a bit of blue in, and I thought I looked really good. And my dad goes, he sort of looked at us like, went, are you really going out like that? I went, yeah. He says, you look like a parrot. So I went, oh, well, get in.
I was a bit of a punk fan from the hangover from the 70s. My partner, now, she was a goth at the time.
But there was some good music, but there was a lot of variety. You had everything from heavy metal to goth music to synthesised pop to just total dross.
What kind of house did you live in during the 80s?
A street called Rosalind Street, which is right in the middle of the colliery sector. If you know Ashington at all, it's made up with a central core of colliery roads that are about 3/4 of a mile long.
With good neighbours, there wasn't much trouble. It was a quiet area.
The rents were quite decent. The houses you got were normally in good repair and the council looked after them.
Everybody knitted together. I found the community spirit was just great.
Luckily, we both had jobs, so we bought the house for $16,500 in 1982.
Whether you like Margaret Thatcher or not, it was good because a lot of people bought the houses instead of paying the rent, and a lot of people done well out of it, so you might have called her, but she did do a good thing for the renter bar, yeah.
It was so wrong, that those houses were our houses. They belonged to every one of us.
The Tory ideology is against the welfare state, and so the idea is that what we do is we can sell off the council houses, we'll get rid of the housing stock, therefore we don't have to maintain it, therefore it's another chunk of welfare state that's been removed, and I think that's really wrong, and I think we're really paying the price for it now.
It leaves less and less houses for people who genuinely need to be housed in social housing.
I think people should have the right to buy their house, but I think a lot of people used it as an excuse to make money.
But she wasn't letting the council spend the money that they got from selling the houses to build more houses. And guess what? You haven't got enough houses now.
What was your job in the 80s?
Well, maybe if I go back 3 years to the 77 when I got the sack for trade union activities. And in the 80s, I was blacklisted. So I took a lot of dead-end jobs.
I became unemployed as soon as I left the army. There wasn't any work around. Work was scarce. You would sit and watch the news, and there'd be like a ticker tape going across the bottom of the screen. of factories that were closing, industries that were closing.
I didn't have the impression that there's anything I couldn't be because I was a girl.
And women just kind of thought, I can do what you can do. I want to work my way up and have a good career.
There was definitely a drive to push girls into science. And also then, there was full grants. So I knew I'd get a full grant. So I got a full grant to go to university and the fees were free.
I started the working in the mines in 1954.
There was loads of characters doing the pit, loads, too many to mention.
You enjoyed everything, and you looked at your elders and see how them worked.
The positive, it's good work. You've got good mates round about you, and when you go, you do a shift, and you quite enjoy doing that shift.
Oh, I love my job. I loved the lads that were there.
Oh, I loved it. I wish I could go back, and I've been finished 20 odd years.
You might think it's hard, but it's easy once you get into it.
Everybody started on what they call the buttons, just controlling the belts. Then you went on to supplies, which was a step up. From the supplies, then to your first training.
We had to work at the bottom of the shaft and about a mile in and then 2 miles in. And
they had their own language. They looked after each other for their very lives. They relied on a pit pony for their lives.
Anything from 18 inches to 2.5 foot. And they were often lying on their side, and there was water on. So horrendous conditions, really.
Conditions were all right, just exactly what a pit should be like.
My dad worked miles out under the North Sea, and when he came from the pit, his clothes were soaking because it was dripping through. But they were also thick with coal dust. So if you stood them for long enough beside the fire, they dried like a piece of marble.
My shift was 3:45 in the morning till 11 o'clock in the morning. The camaraderie down the mines was very good, but the job itself, I wouldn't say my worst enemy doing. No. And people used to say, oh, pitmen are rich and, you know, they've got a great life.
If I was doing my job and the pitman was doing his, he was going to get a lot more money than me. A hell of a lot more money. Having said that, he was in a lot more danger than I was.
And I had holidays that a lot of people didn't have. But I paid for it in that I had my dad suffer for a good bit of his life, not being able to breathe. That was the price of coal.
Later on you felt it, but at the time, no, because you were a young daft lad, that'll never bother. And the older ones, well, didn't lift with your head, because nah, that'll not bother me. Oh, didn't lift like that? Nah, that'll not bother me. Obviously, later on in life, it come to fruition that it did bother you.
Yeah, breathing. Yeah. A lot of people come out with, they've got their knees.
And my first one was a broken rib, broke tibia and fibia.
And you knew that in 1951 there was a major pit disaster in Eaton Colliery, a disaster in which my dad had changed his shifts, and the man who asked him to change was killed.
My brothers went, but my dad used to say, never go down the pit, because he came out of the pits because he was involved in a roof fall, and the guy next to him got trapped and he lost his life. And my father, he was trapped next to him, they got him out. And after that, my father came out of the coal mines.
I think the time I was there was 3 men killed.
My granddad had been killed at the pit. My step-granddad died of pneumoconiosis. My own dad had emphysema. My friend, when I was just in secondary school, her dad was trapped and then brought out dead from Easington Pit, and I will never forget that day.
I've carried a man out dead.
Why do you think the miners went on strike?
I think they were dictated to by a very strong trade union.
The strike happened in 84, but we were prepared from 1980.
Miners didn't decide to go on strike. They'd lost a series of ballots prior to the miners' strike. But one particular coal mine walked out, which caused a rolling strike where one pit would come out after the other.
The union leader come across, lads, we're not going down to work today. We're coming on strike. They're striking all over the country. It'll not be long. We'll be back shortly, couple of weeks. Couple of weeks turned into a couple of months. Couple of months turned into, well, eventually a year.
There was going to be a lot of mines closed and it was kept secret. And some did fund papers. The government denied it at that time.
Everybody could see the writing was on the wall. There was going to be a fight between the unions, particularly the miners' unions and Mrs. Thatcher. Mrs. Thatcher had come to Power saying she was going to sort the unions out.
Our union was the best union in the country, probably the world. You couldn't have wished for being a better union.
The trade unions that had grown up in the post-war period had gained a lot of power on the basis of the nationalised industries. Workers had won a lot of rights.
Historically, they had been strong. They'd opposed the government before. They'd led to the general strike in 1926.
What happened in the 80s was quite frankly horrific. It was almost a form of class genocide. It was a way of destroying the unions. And the unions that fought, I mean, we have weekends now, we have bank holidays, we have lunch breaks, we have toilets on site, you know, and this is all thanks to your unions. We didn't have any of this. 12-year-olds can't go down coal mines, that's thanks to your unions.
I'm a believer in unions. The unions were getting too strong. The tail was shaking the dog.
You needed them. You'll always need unions. Some union men are in it for themselves, but Northumberland Union, they were in it for the men.
I was a bus driver at the time, and I worked in a national company, Western SMT, and I was the shop steward. I was the trade union representative, trying to get better conditions, better working conditions, and I was effective in what I was doing, but they eventually just sacked me, and I took it to an industrial tribunal, and the industrial tribunal said, or the company says, we'll pay you any amount of compensation, we're just not having you back.
Would like to know what you thought of Thatcher.
I absolutely hated her.
She killed the North East.
I would dance in her grave.
Just an evil woman. I honestly believe that she was evil.
You're wasting your time getting involved in politics when you're in the police, because you're not allowed to voice your opinions, so, and I tried not to have any. But I had a little soft spot for her, really.
Now I hate to say I despise someone, but I despised everything that woman stood for.
She destroyed, she devastated, firstly the miners, her and McGregor.
What we have seen in this country is the emergence of an organised revolutionary minority who are prepared to exploit industrial disputes, but whose real aim is the breakdown of law and order and the destruction of democratic parliamentary government.
I thought Margaret Thatcher was very, very strong woman, very strong Prime Minister.
If the Labour leaders at the time were as staunch and as strong in the defence of their class as she was as strong and staunch in defence of her class, then I think society would probably look a lot different.
Yes, she was the leader of it. She didn't make all the decisions by herself. She had a parliament that done that. So parliament were just as bad as her.
And they were willing to destroy whole communities without a plan of what to do next, to rip out the industry, close the coal mines, shipyards. My granddad used to work in the shipyards, and it was about whipping them back into shape and making them the underdogs again, and making them tug their forelocks and doff their caps again to the ruling classes. It was a total reversal of the previous sort of 40 years hard work of social reform.
The destruction she wrought without so much of thinking of the consequences of what that would be for masses of people across the country, and not just in mining communities.
She might as well have stuck a knife in me when she shut my pit.
Thatcher called the miners during the strike the enemy within. She was the head of the enemy as far as we were concerned.
The enemy within, no. The real enemy within were the ruling politicians.
If I had a gun at my hand at the time, I know what I'd been locked up. I mean, if you think of it, we were told we're traitors.
That upsets me because my brother was a miner, but he was also a prisoner with the Japanese for 4.5 years, and he fought for his country, and he stood up for what the country meant, and he put himself through agonies as a prisoner, and she had the audacity to call the enemy within. No, she was the enemy within, that woman.
And a lot of people still admire her, and I say, what's to admire about a woman that closed shipyards? Not because they weren't making money, because it was political.
I think if Margaret Thatcher had been a man, she would have had total respect. And I think it's because she was a woman that she got disrespect.
She was a pure bastard. She wasn't a woman.
Arthur Scargill thought he was God.
The press definitely made an enemy of Arthur Scargill.
Scargill had a hidden agenda, and the hidden agenda was to take down a Conservative government. He wanted the Labour government.
The union took it upon themselves to pull everybody out.
He didn't have a ballot. He didn't get the support he needed. If he had a ballot, he would have got the support.
When Scargill had already taken Pithead ballot and got the mandate for the folk.
The unions had too much power. Yes, they did. The workers didn't, because the workers did what the union wanted them to rather than how it should be. The union do what the workers wanted.
I mean, Arthur Scargill, as I say, he was well off, you know, his own house, you know, getting paid still. We didn't have a penny.
Who had links with Moscow, whether he did or not, it doesn't matter. The fact is the paper said he did.
They definitely tried to paint him as some form of communist.
They're getting money from mining unions in communist countries. It doesn't do the public opinion of how the strike's going a lot of good.
He was right. Everything he said was right. Thatcher was out to shut all the pits.
What he was saying at the time was like, this is the start of it. This is the dismantling of working class industries and the dismantling of unions. It was entirely true.
And we formed our own, what was called the North Tyneside Miners Support Group. We had weekly meetings and we organised fundraising for miners and their families.
I said to the men, to the rest of the committee, I think we need to be organising women, because if we don't organise the women, the strike won't last. We agreed that we would send a letter to every woman in East Durham.
And sort of try and set up some sort of group to support each other.
The only good things that I can remember about the miners' strike was how people came together, and the miners that were on strike, the people took food parcels and that. I think the majority of the community was with them.
People would support you, or they would say, well, I don't know if I agree with it, but I don't like what's happening to the families. Or it's all self-inflicted, you know, you should get yourself back to work.
We spent the whole time just collecting money on the street, just so that we could feed the families.
Me and Denise Gregory went to the miners' meeting, but we couldn't go in the meeting because there'd never been any women in the meeting. Billy Straubs, the union chair, he came out and he said, you can come in now. I lifted my foot right up and I said, are you sure? Because once this foot comes over that threshold, it's not going back, mind.
The strike created immense hardship amongst people.
On a daily basis on the picket lines, or going out collecting food, collecting money for the strike fund. Some of the mortgage companies, the Co-op for instance, suspended the mortgages of some of the miners so that they wouldn't run into arrears.
The Co-op distribution centre, and someone we knew worked there, and they used to send us supplies. And it was allegedly damaged goods, but I'm sure some of it was quite deliberately damaged to send to us.
And I knew one milkman, he all through the strike, he left a family 2 pints of milk a day. And he got the money back, but how brave of him to do that. And the butchers, the people that was our customers, when they were gone into the shop, they maybe going for a few links of sausage or some mince, what they could afford, and they were putting extra stuff into the parcels.
Miners have a strong tradition of unity. It's born out of the type of work that they do underground. The solidarity between people.
The tradition was that you wouldn't cross a picket line. That was seen as unacceptable. It was a tradition in the Labour movement. You don't cross a picket line. You don't betray your fellow workers.
My mother, when the first scab went in at Easington, my mother, she says, I couldn't shout scab. Everybody was shouting scab. She says, I just said, how are you, bonny lad? Don't go in. She says, and he didn't go in, he turned back. So it must have been because I said that, Heather.
And Alec was absolutely teeming with miners, trying to stop the people who were blacklegging, as they call it, going to break the strike. I mean, I've never seen anything like it outside the Blue Bell. It's a load of policemen. I mean, hundreds.
When the scabs, as they were called, was the ones who wanted to go back to work, were taken in by a coach. The coaches were armoured with mesh across the windows, and we had to form lines between ourselves and the coaches and the pickets who were throwing bricks. And when the coaches came in, the pickets would push, hoping that they could push us under the buses So that was quite scary.
I just thought I was just a hard man, and I'll have to get on that bus the first day. The bricks went through the window. The glass was just shattering on everything. But we got the bus in because there's millions of police there.
Battle buses, when they were on, it was like an SES operation getting we in. Yes, the first few days, lots and lots of pickets because the first time it happened out, and that just whittled away because there was bigger fish to fry in Nottingham, in Yorkshire.
The police behaved in a brutal fashion. Some of the miners got stuck in as well, but some of them were quite violent confrontations.
We got stopped. There was a roadblock. Where are you going? I said, oh, I'm going to my mum's. I'm taking the bairns down. What for? I says, well, she looks after them and she takes them to school. How long will you be? I says, about a quarter of an hour. Oh, OK, you can go through. And the little one shouts, but Mum, you didn't tell that policeman we were going to the picket line first, did you? And I thought I could have just killed him.
And then other places like Brinkley, an open cast site, you were standing talking to them until the buses turned up with this so-called scabs in, and then they would start spitting and cursing and swearing at you and trying to assault you. And then when the buses got in, it was back to normal. They would start talking to you again, sharing cups of coffee, and because we used to provide all the coffee for them because we got it for nothing, and they had out.
The Tory government's preparations also involved deploying soldiers in police uniforms on picket lines.
And they weren't just police, they were brought in, they were soldiers. So they were soldiers that were dressed up in police uniforms, and they just attacked the miners that were on the picket line. And we had our grave, we had the different pits, and miners were killed. So they were just defending their right to work.
By the time it got well into approaching a year on strike, it was very, very difficult for some families. And when you've got pressure inside your family, your children are suffering, and you can see why people returned to work, but it was the wrong decision because they were letting down the people who stayed out.
And they were banging on their shields to intimidate the people. But then when they chased the miners forward and they opened their ranks, them horses supposed to be trained to move away crowds sideways, pushing, shoving, and they'd done like a cavalry charge in, and they were running over the top of people. And as soon as they were down, the police was in, beating them with their truncheons, and you could tell by the look of them, they were relishing it, a lot of them.
With policemen standing, banging their shields, just to get the adrenaline, to feel they were going into a war.
Just like walk down the street, and then the bus came along, take the workers in, and then the police just started beating on their shields, and just, I was at the front, and they just says, "Run, you bastards." So I just turned around and run because they were running at us.
And they put this man recovering from major stomach surgery into the police van. This little woman is shouting, "I want me man. Why are you locking him up? He hasn't done anything." So they put her in the van and all.
They come out with, and they meant to hurt her. Meant. My granddad was a police, and I was always brought up to respect the law, always. But I couldn't respect that.
The missiles would bounce off the buses and hit us from behind. So there was a few minor injuries that way. But I never seen any serious injuries at all. But it was terrifying.
A little bit niggle between the police and them because they were making a lot of money them times. And they were telling the miners what they spent their money on, going on holidays.
They were getting a lot of overtime, the policemen, and they were showing their checks. You seen it on the television, they're showing their checks to the miners and saying, "Carry on, lads, keep it up, look at this, I'm getting another car."
I was arrested on the picket line, and I think it was around about the January of 1985. Again, it was in protest to try and stop the buses coming in with the miners who decided to return to work. And we just kind of stood around. The police grabbed us and threw us in the back of vans, so we weren't actually being violent or anything. The Tory government spent millions breaking that strike. In fact, there was no stone left unturned.
It's a horrendous thing, but we were just pawns in it all. I mean, shortly before the miners' strike, Margaret Thatcher had made sure that we all got big pay rises, which we did, and a lot of people said we were bought, but we weren't. You've only got to comply with the rules, the law, the orders that you're given, and there's no way you can turn around and say no.
In the afternoon, there were more injuries and arrests as police drove the pickets back up a hill away from the coking plant. Cars from a nearby scrapyard were overturned and set alight to stop the police advance.
When they were there at the football match, they were scraping their money to go and watch the football. I'm getting a bit emotional about this, actually. The away fans would wave their £10 notes at the supporters because they were poor in the north.
It was more about survival towards the end. Things were much, much harder.
And that was one of the reasons why some of the miners went back after a long time. It was starvation.
Sea coal, and that was the only thing I'd done, which I never thought I'd do. Went down to the beach when the tide went out, left little granules of coal that we bagged up for heating. 2 little kids, obviously the families helped. The wife's mother and father, obviously my mother.
I always remember these guys were walking around with, you know, the basket to get when you go into a supermarket, and they were just going around the shelves and they're chucking all these toys in the basket. I went up to this guy because I'm nosy, and I says, "What are you doing?" I says, "He's just fill," and he says, "We're buying Christmas presents for the miner strikes kids because I didn't have a penny."
I remember the French and Russian miners sent solidarity presents to Northumberland and Durham.
We got turkeys and chickens from France. If a miner lived in our village, but he worked at another colliery, 3 mile away, 2 mile away, wherever, he didn't need to walk to bloody see him 2 mile away to get a chicken or a turkey for Christmas. He got it off us in Easington. So all the groups agreed we would do that. In comes the union. "What you doing like, Heather?" I said, "Well, this is the way we've decided." "No, you can't do it like that." "Oh," I said, "can we not?" "Lasses, we're on strike." And me poor mother's sitting, she's going, "Our weather's called them on strike. We've got all these chickens and turkeys, what we're going to do with them?" Union came and said, "It's all right, Heather. Do it the way you want."
Come towards the end, I think, where you couldn't blame them.
My stepfather-in-law was told if he didn't get back to work, he would lose his pit pension. And he was 60, 62, and he couldn't afford to do it. So that's why he went back.
The Thatcher government went on to close down the mining industry pit by pit, and we are left with the situation we have today, where there are no more coal mines left in the northeast of England.
Had the miners just held their firm at that time, I think that they would have defeated Thatcher.
But to some extent, if you look at what happened here, it happened all over Europe afterwards. Those big industries, we don't have them in Northern Europe anymore.
And there's still families split and still not talking to each other because one of them also went to work.
It depends why they went back, right? Most of them were forced back. I lost a lot of friends who had been friends for years.
Some of them, it took a long time for them to get back together again. And the children suffered because of that.
But I had a lot of friends on the side I've just talked about, Brinkley there, and they spat on me and never spoke to me again.
And then when the collieries eventually closed shortly after the end of the strike, which the miners had always predicted and the government went ahead, it led to a lot of unemployment.
The community was never just the same, you know. A lot of people moved away.
I think there's been massive repercussions of the miners' strike. I think it still scars people to this day. I don't think Britain as a whole has actually recovered from that.
Tore the soul out of a community. I understand that we have to have progress and things move on. And you know, mining was a dirty, horrible, dangerous job. But whole communities were built around those pits. And to just destroy it, just take it away without any plan, a little bit like Brexit, without any plan for what you're going to do next, I think was disgusting.
I'm not sure if it was worth propping up. I think so. You know, I'm an environmentalist, and you know I can't support coal. For all that, there's jobs. I can't. It's not worth the air pollution and climate change.
Look at the coal mines. They're out of fashion, aren't they? They're not using coal anymore. They were on hiding to nothing anyway. And I've said that my father was a miner. Support the miners in that way.
If Arthur Scarborough had given the men a vote, the men wouldn't go back.
If it was still going now, I would be on the picket line now.
The unions suddenly became that big, the workers did what the unions wanted. And that's what destroyed the unions.
They found Thatcher was unmovable because she wanted to destroy us. You know, they made it quite clear they wanted to end what they saw as the might of trade unions.
She was hell-bent on closing the pits, and she did.
It wasn't all a loss. People learnt lessons. The biggest lesson now, though, is to resist those that continue to want to divide, turning one against the other, whether it's turning miner against miner, worker against worker, worker against immigrants.
We didn't win in that we didn't keep the pits open, but we won the moral victory in that we stood for a year and fought. If we hadn't fought and she'd shut them, I would have thought, God, we've lost, we were so stupid. We should have stood. But we fought, we stood, and to me, we still stand tall.
I've spent my lifetime mining that black diamond, just like my forefathers and they. Generations of lives bound together into the blackness. There's no good courage against that blessed gleaming sea. Don't cry for me now. They say that it's over. Don't cry for me now, my Bonnie Henny. Cry for the lads who spent a lifetime down in the blackness. Miles underground and deep out at sea. And I've spent my lifetime mining that black diamond beside my brothers with hearts mightier than steel, faces black like the ghouls of hell before us, with gleaming eyes, shining teeth. Don't cry for me now. They say that it's over. Don't cry for me now, my Bonnie Henny. Shed a tear for the lads who spent a lifetime down in the blackness, miles underground and deep out to sea.